Hello and welcome to our fourth episode in our video series on insight discovery, where we investigate a source of insight that is more conscious and deliberate than the previous ones. In contrast with analogies, anomalies or asymmetric knowledge, this time around there is no incubation period, nor are people sort of accidentally stumbling onto sudden realizations by serendipity. Instead, they're in dire need for out-of-the-box problem solving, with the clock winding down, and it could be a matter of life or death. Imagine you find yourself in a tough situation, an emergency that came out of the blue. There's no time for steady analysis. None of the plausible tactics can work, and then, out of desperation, you must find a counterintuitive solution that will save you. A leverage point you might never have tried to use if any of the acceptable moves had looked feasible. Now, precisely that feedstock for insight is what I call creative desperation. You see, creative desperation is the epitome of innovation. So let's look at an example of people finding an unorthodox way out of a trap that seemed inescapable. This is the story of a blow-up that occurred at a wildfire in Montana, US. Now you need to know, a blow-up is a sudden firestorm resulting from a collision of fire and winds. The event is remembered as the Mann Gulch Fire. And interestingly enough, it recently became part of the conversation about COVID-19. You see, we are at the equivalent of about minute 5:45, the time when a crew of 16 firefighters faced a fire that was burning uphill below them, forcing the men to attempt an escape up a steep slope. The Mann Gulch incident points to innovation in an emergency on the fly. It also speaks to us of a very fast-moving event. You can't outrun a pandemic more than a wildfire. By the time you turn to run, it is already upon you. So here's what happened at Mann Gulch. A team of smoke jumpers, these are firefighters that are parachuted to fight fire in inaccessible places. They had been dropped at the top of a ridge near the Missouri River. Their plan was to hike down the north slope to the river and then cross over to the south slope where the fire was burning to attack the flames from below, because as we know, fire spreads upward. Now they had hiked most of the way down when their team leader, a man by the name of Wagner Dodge, noticed smoke down their side of the valley. Somehow the fire had spotted. That means sparks carried by the wind started a new fire directly downhill from them. And this fire was going to come roaring up the north slope where they were located. So Dodge ordered his team to run for safety back to the top of the hill. However, when he looked back, he realized they wouldn't make it. The fire was picking up speed and gaining on them. Look at the graph. On the bottom axis, you see the time sequence from the moment the spot fire starts at minute 5:30. The vertical axis shows the distance covered by the men in the fire, above and below point 1, which is when Dodge saw the first signs of smoke and they reversed their course at minute 5:45. The fire is the dotted line, the men are the solid line. The graph shows the heartbreaking race between them. Note how the distance gets smaller and the time gets shorter. That curve looks like an epidemic curve. Fire spreads exponentially and a pandemic spreads exponentially. You can't outrun it. It moves so fast that it will overcome you. At point 2, time is 5:53. 8 minutes after they started running. The crew members dropped their tools in their mad scramble. The fire is now only 1 minute behind them, flames 30 to 200 feet high, traveling at 600 feet a minute. A blow-up to a forest fire is like a hurricane to an ocean storm. The last portion of the graph is a cruel 78% upward slope. The slowest man was scored at 5:56, 11 minutes after the crew had turned around. The others were caught in the next minute. 2 men made it to safety. 12 others did not. Wagner Dodge survived through an act of creative desperation. At 5:55, point 3 on the graph, he lit a fire in front of him, assuming that this fire would raise up the slope ahead of him and he could find refuge in its ashes. He escaped with less than 30 seconds to spare. We will never quite know what went on in Dodge's mind. Desperation forced him to change his mindset, shifting his focus from the fire behind him to the fuel in front. He looked for a false assumption that was trapping him, yet could be overturned. The grass fuel, my enemy, can also be my friend. This was the first documented use of what came to be known as an escape fire, a leap forward in firefighting training ever after. Creative desperation is a discontinuous discovery of insight. It does not naturally evolve from our previous beliefs. Actually, some of our core beliefs have to be radically altered. We can trace the new story back to the original one, but we can't take it the other way. That is why it is a leap. It isn't a product of a deductive process, as is the case in asymmetric knowledge, which explains why the people around us don't gain the insight even if they have the same information as we do. My highly esteemed colleague, Dr. Carlos Marqueri, academic director of the Bachelor in Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence at IE University in Madrid, refers to the concept of reconstruction of our innovation ecosystem. But with new ecosystem, he doesn't mean a network of stakeholders, but a holistic vision with an upstream mindset based on pains and not gains. COVID-19 is such a painful turning point that makes change inevitable. The beliefs that anchor our behavior need to change fundamentally, not just incremental. Doing things a bit more environmentally friendly, a little more sustainable, a gradual improvement in our healthcare system. Those things are good, but they're quality management, not radical innovation, says Marqueri. Yet if we're serious about beating the odds by the time the next pandemic hits the world, we better start doing some upstream thinking. And by that I mean shifting beliefs that anchor our most decisive actions. Creative desperation forces us to critically examine our assumptions and detect what is keeping us captured. When we want to escape from impasse, we have to undo the flawed beliefs that trip us up. So in the middle of a fast-moving pandemic, we must disrupt our thinking and ask ourselves, what's the equivalent of an escape fire? Which core belief do we need to replace by a bottom-up news story? Is it in mobility, education, sustainability, or population growth and urbanization? Are we ready to make those changes, or do we stay put in our comfortable beliefs that social distancing is going to get us out of a blow-up? Because breakthrough means breaking something, and the time is 5:55. See you in our next episode. Stay tuned.